Imagine standing at the finish line of a major bipartisan achievement. Months of negotiation, compromises from both sides, and a housing affordability bill that actually has the votes to pass. The pens are ready, the cameras are set, and then, at the very last second, the desk is cleared, the signing is canceled. Instead of a celebration of compromise, a new demand is thrown onto the table. Pass a completely different, highly controversial voting reform bill first, or nothing gets signed.
It sounds like a scene from a political drama series, but it is exactly the reality we are watching unfold in Washington right now. The decision to halt the bipartisan housing bill in favor of demanding the Save America Act, which focuses on proof of citizenship voting reforms, is a classic high-stakes political pivot. It is about shifting the spotlight from a policy area of quiet cooperation to one of loud, ideological confrontation.
It really makes you wonder about the calculation behind it. On one hand, housing affordability is a pressing, day-to-day issue for millions of people. It is a tangible problem with a tangible, bipartisan solution sitting right there. Why walk away from a guaranteed win to fight a battle that is bound to face intense resistance?
Because in modern politics, consensus is rarely the currency that buys the most leverage. By tying housing to voting reforms, the narrative is instantly rewritten. It forces the opposition into a difficult corner. Either agree to voting reforms they strongly oppose, or explain to the public why the housing bill stalled. It is a strategy designed to mobilize the base and control the national conversation, even if it means putting critical, everyday legislation on ice.
But this kind of hardball strategy does not just create friction across the aisle, it is causing serious ripples within the party itself. We are hearing reports of incredibly tense, even shouting matches behind closed doors with senators over foreign policy, particularly regarding Iran.
That is where the real fracture lines are starting to show. Historically, foreign policy was the one area where a party could rally together, presenting a united front to the world. But right now, the internal debate over how to handle Iran is exposing a deep ideological divide. On one side, you have the traditional hawks who advocate for strong, decisive intervention and robust military deterrence. On the other side, there is a growing faction pushing for restraint, questioning the long-term costs of another deep entanglement in the Middle East. When those two worldviews clash in a closed room, the temperature rises very quickly.
It is fascinating because it is not just a disagreement over tactics, it is a fundamental debate about the nation's role on the global stage. And it is happening at a time when the administration is asking for a massive financial commitment. We are talking about a supplemental funding request of over $88 billion for the Iran conflict and related defense needs, alongside additional funding to combat Ebola.
$88 billion is an astronomical figure, and asking for that level of funding while simultaneously blocking domestic legislation creates a very difficult messaging challenge. How do you justify prioritizing massive overseas expenditures and public health crises abroad when domestic priorities, like housing, are being held hostage for political leverage? It creates a sense of cognitive dissonance for the average observer.
Absolutely. It feels like a high-wire act where one misstep could alienate the very lawmakers needed to pass the budget. The friction in those Senate meetings suggests that even allies are starting to push back against the pressure. It makes you realize how complex these layers of global strategy and domestic politics truly are. You cannot look at any of these events in isolation. They are all deeply interconnected. And honestly, trying to untangle these complex threads is exactly why we do this show, and why projects like the one we want to tell you about today are so vital.
That is so true. And for those of us who want to look past the headlines and understand the deeper mechanics of these events, there is a podcast we highly recommend checking out. The New Sentinel is a podcast dedicated to providing in-depth discussions and deep dives into a wide array of topics. From the glitz and glamour of pop culture to the strategic intricacies of military operations, they cover it all.
Each episode of The New Sentinel is thoughtfully crafted to offer listeners a comprehensive understanding of the subject matter, featuring expert interviews, detailed analysis, and engaging storytelling. Whether you are a pop culture enthusiast or someone with a keen interest in global security, The New Sentinel has something for everyone. We highly encourage you to tune in, view, comment, subscribe, and post an inquiry to stay informed and entertained. It is a fantastic resource for anyone who loves deep analytical conversations.
It really is. And speaking of deep strategic analysis, let's get back to that $88 billion supplemental funding request. When you look at a number that large, you have to ask where that money is actually going and what the strategic objective is.
Right, because $88 billion is not just a line item, it is a statement of priorities. A significant portion of that is aimed at the conflict involving Iran, which suggests the administration expects a prolonged, resource-intensive engagement. But then you also have the request for Ebola funding packaged alongside it. Why bundle a major geopolitical conflict with a global health crisis?
It is a classic legislative strategy. By combining high-priority security funding with essential public health resources, you create a package that is incredibly difficult for Congress to reject. If a lawmaker votes against the package because they oppose the military spending, they can be accused of neglecting a potential public health emergency. It is about building a legislative shield around controversial funding requests.
But it also highlights the sheer scale of the challenges the administration is trying to manage simultaneously. You have a domestic legislative gridlock, intense internal party debates over foreign policy, a volatile situation in the Middle East, and the looming threat of infectious diseases. It feels like trying to steer a ship through multiple storms at once, with a crew that cannot agree on which way to turn the rudder.
That is a perfect metaphor. And the danger is that when you try to fight on every front at once, you risk exhausting your political capital. The testy exchanges with senators suggest that the capital is already running thin. Senators are not just quiet observers. They have their own constituencies, their own political survival to think about. If they feel they are being pushed into defending unpopular foreign interventions or blocking popular domestic bills, they will push back.
So where does this leave us? If the bipartisan housing bill remains stalled and the funding requests face a gridlocked Congress, we are looking at a potential standstill. It raises a deeper, almost philosophical question about modern governance. Has the process of making laws become so focused on leverage and messaging that the actual act of governing has become secondary?
It certainly feels that way at times. When the threat of withholding a signature on a helpful bipartisan bill is used as a tool to force a vote on a separate, divisive issue, the system begins to look less like a deliberative body and more like a game of chicken. The risk is that the public loses faith in the ability of the government to solve basic problems. If housing, health, and security all become bargaining chips in a larger political game, the cost of entry into that game becomes too high for the average citizen.
It is a sobering thought. We are watching a high-stakes chess match where the board is constantly shifting and the rules seem to be rewritten with every move. As we look ahead, the key indicator will be whether the administration can find a way to reconcile these internal party divisions. If they cannot get their own senators on the same page regarding Iran, passing a massive $88 billion package is going to be an uphill battle, to say nothing of the voting reforms.
The next few weeks will be telling. We will see if the pressure tactics yield results, or if they lead to a deeper stalemate that stalls the legislative agenda entirely. In politics, leverage is only useful if the other side is willing to bend. If neither side blinks, the whole system grinds to a halt.
And that is the cliffhanger we are left with. Will compromise find a way back to the table, or are we entering an era where legislative drama completely eclipses policy results? It is a question that affects not just the politicians in Washington, but every citizen waiting for real solutions to real-world problems. Thank you for diving into these complex dynamics with us today. Keep asking questions, keep looking beyond the surface, and we will see you next time.